propping open his shed door. Bollocks. The vandalized meter toppled over, denting a portion of the 35,000 bottle caps that made up the floor. Frank collapsed next to it and removed his mask. Double bollocks. What's going on over there, Frank? It was his next-door neighbor, Henry Puddester. Henry, mate, you're just the person I need to see. Henry's face appeared around the hedge and crossed the threshold into the oversized shed. His salt and pepper head looked like he had been electrocuted. Frank, why do you have a telephone booth in your shed? Paper was taped over all the windows. Everything else in the shed was covered with white drop sheets. Frank stayed where he was on the floor and stoked up his vape pen. His shaking hands clutched the silver canister. I'm painting it blue. I see that. Why? Trying to take my mind off the news, Frank's cheeks became concave as he inhaled deeply and let a cloud of smoke emerge from his lungs. By repainting a telephone booth? Yeah, I thought I'd build a TARDIS, go back in time to when I was in good shape and Patty still loved me. Good luck with that. I saw Patty yesterday. She was here on the cul-de-sac. Yeah, she wasn't coming to visit. She was just dropping some of Caitlin's uni bills. Maybe you should consider dating other people. I'm not like you, Henry. I don't have those movie star looks. Anyway, I think Patty will eventually come to her senses. Henry lifted his nose to the roof. Besides spray paint, I smell cotton candy. Oh, I know. Frank put down the spray can, pulled the sheets into a heap on the floor and inhaled more smoke. Cotton candy is the new flavor at Smoke and Guns, the only one I buy now. Reminds me of the regatta. You know that stuff is going to kill you. Henry raised his eyebrows. I know. If the beer doesn't kill me first. Frank patted his belly. Fancy a cold one? Frank crawled to the tiny fridge that was now wedged under the workbench to make room for the telephone box. He had removed all the shelving so the fridge could house a 20-liter stainless steel beer keg. After letting some gas escape from the keg chamber, he pulled out a chilled A&W mug and filled it halfway, head filling the rest. That's the darkest stout I've seen since Dublin. Henry took a long, hard pull on the beer and exhaled his appreciation. Now that Frank had put away his vape pen, the shed went back to smelling like spray paint mingled with full-blown brewery on production day. He sat in his chair and his eyes followed Henry's to the drying hops, slightly blue, hanging from the window winder, and then to a mangled copy of the Telegram sitting on top of Frank's biggest brew tank. Thought you didn't read the paper, said Henry. Blimey, I try not to. Aggravates the kidney stones. But my communications team, Frank put his fingers in the air to indicate the quotation marks, insists have a butcher's at page 3. Henry looked underneath an ad for a Chase the Ace fundraiser in the Ghouls. Ongoing vandalism of parking meters cost the city of St. John's more than $1.3 million in 2017. Jesus, Murphy, that is bad, Henry said, but not as bad as this. He flipped the paper back to page 1 where a 2-inch headline ran across the top. Kidnapped supermarket baby located unharmed. Bloody hell, you're right, said Frank. Blimey, Henry. Frank thought about the glee in Dick Turner's wonky eyes when he strolled out of his driveway on Pine Place and recounted the details of Henry's greengrocer saga. How'd you know it was me? Asked Henry. Frank was afraid to admit that Dick had told him. Dick and Henry had some sort of long-lasting feud that did not need reinforcement. I heard it on the radio.
Awesome.
So these two need each other. They need each other to go get all their burdens off their chest, and
right.
It works.
Right.
So they hang out in their sheds in the backyard, Henry and Frank.
Thank you, Susan. It's a very, very funny book. Very funny book. Let's hear from Heidi, and then we'll have a chat about both of these books. Heidi is going to read from her beautiful book, Melt.
Well, so this is Melt. It came out about a year ago. It follows two friends, Jess and Kate. They've been friends since childhood. One of them went to Catholic school, one of them went to Protestant school. And the book sort of floats back and forth in time between 2016 and the late 90s when they were in high school, moving into their adult lives. So in this scene I'm going to read, Jess is sort of dealing with her busy family life, and she's also grieving her mother who's passed away recently. pancake batter poured onto the pan, the brown butter spattering onto Jess's wrist. Liam, her youngest, wiggles his bum from side to side in the Star Wars pajamas her mother gave him last Christmas. Too short in the legs and arms, the fabric gone pilly from washing them too many times, but he won't let go of them, and Jess is just fine with that. He dances from foot to foot, clutching onto his crotch. Do you have to go to the bathroom, bud? No. I think you do, buddy. The kitchen air thickens with pancake smoke and fried butter. Her developing hangover hasn't quite kicked in yet, but she feels it, festering, perched in the back of her skull, preparing to creep into her head by about midday, and then just nuzzle in all day, making itself comfortable, ready to crack a bag of Doritos to feed the pain. Thank God it's a snow day. She couldn't handle a classroom full of youngsters, not today. The pancakes are golden on the edges, and she shouts up the stairs to Dan. Dan, your office is opening at 1. Get at the driveway. Bubbles of batter pop, pop, pop on the pan. I hear you, Jessica. A Jesus Christ is muttered, and she hears the bed springs move. The batter bubbles get bigger and pop faster, and she slides the spatula underneath. Flip, splat. A bit black on one side, but she can scrape that off, and the boys will never know. Last fall, she made marijuana butter for cookies for her mother. She could barely chew the cookies, but they gave her the best relief from the chemotherapy treatments. Stress gave me cancer, Jessica, I'm sure of it. Her mother's eyes drooped. Don't let it get to you. Near the end, her mother lost her breath so easily, wheezing more often than not. Her mother was a librarian at the same school Jess teaches at now. For 30 years, her mother taught children to love reading, before technology. That was the way it was when her mother became a teacher. Degree at 20, waltz right into a job, punch the clock for 30 years, retire at 50. Why should Jess expect it to be any different when her turn came around? But it is different. It's a different planet. It was bad back then when I was teaching in the 90s. It was a bad time, cuts, tension between the school boards. She held her daughter's hand, struggling to draw a breath, lightheaded. But it's worse for your crowd, Jessica. Jess remembers a couple of occasions in the 90s when her mother and Kate's father met each other outside their houses, putting the girls on the school buses in the mornings. They'd have curt chats about work. Non-denominational isn't right. It's letting go of our heritage, don't you think? He'd stand there, squinting his eyes quizzically. With all due respect, John, no, I think it makes sense to end denominational education. We can't afford it. She always spoke with kindness, but she was never afraid to say what she thought. I know how important faith is. I go to church every single Sunday. This is just the economic reality we're living with. The churches will still exist. People will always have faith. But a referendum was coming. In high school, Jess spent one lunch break a week at her nan's house for peanut butter toast. She walked there from school, up Peyton Street, across Elizabeth Avenue, down Baltimore Street. Nan watched The Young and the Restless religiously and complained about Catherine Chancellor, that rich snot. She never missed seeing Ashley Abbott and Catherine Chancellor slaying each other with saucy comments. Crunching her toast between Jess's teeth, the peanut butter was warm and gooey, and the smell of it still comforts her. On July 1st, 1992, Nan rallied with throngs of vicious fishermen and plant workers on the wharf in Bay Bulls. In the lower intestines of the CBC archives, there's footage of Nan shaking her fist in the face of the federal fisheries minister. How come we didn't bring in interim support for fishing families so we didn't have to show the color of our goddamned underwear to every Tom, Dick, and Harry up to social services for $522? Nan's silver head bobbled, her quivering voice indignant as her eyes sprang with tears on the CBC. Her index finger jabbing at the minister's face like she's Ashley Abbott and he's Catherine Chancellor. You don't have to abuse me, said the minister. I didn't take the goddamn fish out of the water. His tailored jacket, his Old Spice, suffocated by the fishermen and women and plant workers' salty tears, their guts and souls and their way of life splattered all across the wharf. Nan and Pop lost their car. Nan couldn't drive Pop to the doctor. The announcement of the cod moratorium ended with the minister leading the crowd in the Ode to Newfoundland. Not one member of the group joined in. They stood there, sullen and betrayed. The minister himself, a local who'd been lured by Ottawa, looked as if he might cry. Just 5 years after the moratorium, threats to cut education, Jess's mother was worried, and then her parents got rid of one of their cars. They stopped ordering pizza on Fridays. Jess has seniority, but how will she manage without the student support that's been cut? The cycle repeats. The sun comes up, the cycle repeats. Jess slides the last plate with the last stack of pancakes onto the table. Here we go, boys. Here's your next round. They're loaded with chocolate chips.
Awesome. Beautiful, thanks.
That was good.
Thank you. It's always yours.
I think it's really interesting talking to you folks aren't at the beginning of your careers, like you've been writing for a long time, but I think a novel, long form fiction is a new thing, right? And there's got to be some sense of self-discovery in that of yourself as a writer and a learning curve as someone who's just about to do this myself. Like there's a real, and I guess I'm really interested in the aspects of these books that are personal. And I find it really easy to make a lot of assumptions about your book, given the characters, about how it might be personal. And that might not be as directly clear with your book. But I was thinking about this morning in terms of I was reading your bio, and like so much of these characters and their fates are tied to the public perception of them through the media. Dolores, is that the character? Dolores and Henry both have these personas that are built up by the media. And as a journalist, anyway, I'd just love to hear you talk about what aspects you see of your professional and personal lives that have manifested in these books you've written.
I don't know if it's my personal life, but as I was writing the story, the story originated with Dolores, the character. And Dolores is a lady, I don't know if the camera can pick that up, but she's a lady who crossed the continent.
Real person?
Well, I made up her character.
Okay.
But it was based upon a postcard.
Based on a real person.
Yeah, I
Postcard.
did a postcard contest for Geist magazine, 500 words. This is the postcard I chose. And then I didn't win the contest, but Dolores lived on in my mind. So Dolores wouldn't go away. So the whole story grew with her, and the other characters came out of her story. So she has glued 4,000 trinkets onto a 1983 Ford LTD and driven from Vancouver to St. John's. When she gets there, she meets Henry. But as I was writing the story, my mother was around 89 and 90 at the time, and I would go to her house 5 days a week at lunchtimes, and we would read the Telegram.
Right.
And it's the stories, mainly briefs, that I read in the Telegram that make up the plot. So there's potentially a black bear on the Avalon Peninsula. There's Chase the Ace and the Ghouls.
Right.
There are stolen parking meter heads, and it all went in there. And I don't know if it was subconscious. You know, I didn't make notes at my mother's, but it was these relaxed afternoon or lunchtime sessions. And then I would go to my afternoon writing session, and my characters started acting out what I had seen in the newspaper.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. What about you, Heidi?
Yeah, I mean, my book is, the characters are my age, so, I mean, it's easy to draw connections between my life. I, you know, grew up in the 90s, or I was in high school in the 90s, and, you know, so mine is very much connected to the feeling here at that time, which was, you know, that this place kind of sucks, you know. There wasn't much opportunity. Like a lot of people my age couldn't get a part-time job. It was like, you know, we heard a lot of, you know, there's no opportunity here in Newfoundland. There's, you know, you got to go away to make a go of it, and it was pretty depressing, right? And I know a lot of people drew connections between that time in 2016 when that budget, the austerity budget, was released. So I just started thinking a lot about that, and about, you know, this, I've always been, like we all are, I suppose, this weird combination of, you know, great self-confidence that we have, but also no self-confidence at all. So it's always just such a delicate dance that we all do every day. So I just, talked to a lot of friends about how they felt about that. And I was in my, I guess, mid to late 30s when I wrote this, and just started noticing, in that decade, people going through relationship breakdowns and sick parents and, parenting. Yeah, it sort of all starts to become real, so that's basically where my characters came from. They come from myself, my friends, but also, a lot of people are my age.
Right.
Yeah.
As I was going to say new authors, but you're not new authors. As new novelists, as first-time novelists, do you want to talk a little bit about? I mean, I think for people aspiring to write a novel and to eventually see it in print, it's a goal, it's a hill. Do you want to talk a little bit about what your journey to publication, your journey to the creation of these pieces was like for you, and what steps and who helped you and that kind of thing?
For me, I had written 2 novels previous, but then I
I didn't know that.
a 5th child as a surprise,
Right.
15 years after my first, and it just threw a wrench into evering.
Were they published, those novels?
No,
Right.
but one is coming out in August.
Oh, great, fantastic.
I'm throwing it around. So
Great,
The
congrats.
Degrees of Barley Lick was written when I lived in British Columbia between 2004 and 2007.
Right.
And in the process of selling Supermarket Baby, I sold this,
Oh,
and the
wonderful.
contract for this was actually signed far earlier than Supermarket Baby, and they were both
Right.
bought the same night, we'll say. So my journey, though, was all about time and getting myself in front of a publisher. But I have a very good friend, Terry Kelly, and he is a singer-songwriter in Nova Scotia, and Terry is blind. And Terry tells us sighted people, don't be blind in your minds. Whatever you set your mind to, you can do. So on a Friday, Terry called and he said, what's up? Why isn't this novel out? You're going to be a best-selling novelist. What's your problem? And I said, I can't get myself in front of publishers. You send it out and nobody looks at it. Terry said, you do yourself up a vision board, get someone to do a mock cover, go to chapters, hold it up in front of the shelf and vision yourself. And he said, if you believe what I'm telling you, you will get a sign. And Monday morning, so that was Friday afternoon, right until after 5 p.m. Monday morning, I was actually working as an extra up in the Old Battery Hotel on the Rex set. And you have a lot of time as an extra. So I was looking through my emails and doing paperwork, and an email came in and it said, you've won the Percy Jane's First Novel Award. And I had forgotten I had submitted.
Right.
And I started crying.
Yeah.
And I called Terry, and Terry said, oh, I didn't know you get the sign so soon.
There's your sign. Yeah.
So from that, it just gave me that boost to apply for a writer's grant with Arts NL, which
Right.
I ultimately got, partially thanks to you. And it also, I went to Nova Scotia and I went to pitch the publisher at Word on the Street.
Right.
And my first contract I was offered came from that.
Oh, fantastic.
So I think it's belief in yourself, but sometimes that has to come from an unlikely source.
Right. What about you, Heidi?
First of all, I love the color. The cover. I attended Susan's book club a while ago. The Red Hots. I keep saying Red Hots, and she was showing a cover. So anyway, I love the cover. My journey started with this book. I guess this was my master's thesis when I
Right.
did my MA in creative writing at Memorial. So it started off as a couple short stories, and I thought they would be linked short stories. Lisa Moore was my thesis supervisor, and she started to say, oh, maybe it's a novel. So I guess I was stuck with it then at that point. So I never thought it would be a novel, but it just it was a very piecey kind of process for me. I mean, it was just, I'd write a scene here and I'd write a scene there,
Right.
and Lisa would give me feedback on each piece. And then once it got to a certain point, I, formed it into a beginning, middle, and end,
Right.
and it's sort of, eventually I graduated, and eventually Lisa introduced me to James Langer at Breakwater, and they said they'd publish it, so that's how it became.
Perseverance and connections is what I'm hearing from both of those stories. Perseverance and
Yeah,
connections.
and a lot of cheerleading.
Right. Yeah.
Lisa is like the cheerleader of fiction in Newfoundland and Labrador, and
I
she's
hear you on that.
gave
And I have to say that my career has been very similar in influence and people helping you along the way. We're unfortunately, I could talk about this stuff all day. We're unfortunately out of time, but it goes by so quickly, doesn't it?
amazing.
I really want to thank you for this discussion, and I really want to thank you for both of these books. They're just really beautiful and alive. They're so alive on the page, and such amazing, engaging readings. Thank you so much, Susan and
Thank
Heidi,
you.
for joining me today, and thank you for joining me. And we're going to leave you today with a song from Andrea Monro.
This is a song called Radio Flyer, and it's about two little boys, two brothers, Mikey and Bobby, who build an airplane out of their Radio Flyer wagon to help Bobby get away from a really awful situation. And it's about how I would like to imagine things turn out in the end for them. My name is Bobby, and I've done nothing much of note, but you may have heard a thing or two about some postcards that I wrote. And I have been the whole world over. I've wandered and roamed, but lately I've been thinking that it's time for heading home. And I was just a child when I flew away, and the tears upon my brother's face, they haunt me to this day. But when I get back home, I will take him in my arms and say, Mike, it wasn't your fault that he did me so much harm. 'Cause what is love except to falter? What is love except to hope? What is love except to trust enough to let somebody go? Now I'm sorry I've been gone away too long. I'm sure that you tried to forget, and I hope that you moved on. For you were brave when I was afraid, and you did what you knew you had to do to keep me safe. 'Cause what is love except to falter? What is love except to hope? What is love except to trust enough to let somebody go? So now I'm packing up my wagon, I'm heading for the hills. There must be one more magic run inside these rusty wheels. My name is Bobby, and I've done nothing much of note, but I've just mailed my final postcard, 'cause tonight I'm heading home. 'Cause what is love except to falter? What is love except to hope? What is love except to trust enough to let somebody go? What is love except to falter? What is love except to hope? What is love except to trust enough to let somebody go?
The following